Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how the influence, especially early when you're a lot of people just looking for direction, right? And you just need to follow something. I mean, I don't think that one thing that I've struggled a little bit with that has been a lot clearer to me recently is that, you know, just be good at a few key things, right? And, nothing is permanent. I mean, you don't have to, because you just choose to go one direction and dedicate a lot of time to learning and a degree, that makes you very valuable in that area. But if you one day decide that that's not for you or you want to do something else, you can change it. And those skills that you've learned there will invariably be very valuable wherever you go. So, I mean, and that's at least what I realized. So,
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. I'm Ricardo Vivian, your host. I'm a business development lead here at Wisenetix, one of the main players when it comes to technical content production within the livestock business. I'm a gold medalist in a graphic design competition, World Skills, the largest skills competition in the world. I got my bachelor's in design and visual communication. And for the past 10 years, I've been adventuring myself in multiple areas from design, communication to business and education. The Wisenetix Podcast is a project that aims to create a platform for people from the industry, the marketing and business leaders to share their ideas, their vision, not only about the industry, about marketing, about business, but also about the world and about their lives. If you notice any problems in my English, that's because that's not my native language. I'm Brazilian, so I speak Portuguese, so please be patient with that. And in this week's episode, our guest is Lasse Jakobsen. Lasse is the Vice President at Protekta, a company that provides products specifically designed to protect animals from common stressors that impact their health, ensuring optimal growth and development. Welcome, Lasse.
thank you, Ricardo. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So I had the chance we are in a after pandemics scenario. So I met a lot of people in the past 2 years since I, started working with the livestock business. And I had the happy experience to meet Lasse in person at the Pork Expo this year. So great, guy. It's great to have you here sharing a little bit of your experiences and ideas and also some good stories about your traveling and life. Uh, and Lasse, for us to start, could you tell us a little bit from yourself?
For sure. Yeah. No, it's been great to connect with you as well too, Ricardo. And I think we would have met virtually, like so many other people over the pandemic first, and then it was great to finally connect in person at the expo. So, but yeah, thanks for having me. And I'll start with a little background. So, I'm also not a native to Canada or the U.S. or North America for that matter. I'm originally from Denmark, hence the very Scandinavian name. And my family, because of my parents, back when I was 8, moved us from Denmark to Canada. So it was back in 2003. Actually, because of the farming industry, pig production, to be specifically, because of my dad's father's relations to pig production. He had some farms in Canada that my dad had been involved with in his younger years, and when he came to retirement, my dad ended up inheriting those farms, and that led to a few years later after that, my parents kind of making the call that either they had to cut the ties with those involvements in Canada, or they'd always thought about the idea of making the move. So they did. Very brave of them. My youngest brother being 6 months at the time, and myself being 8, and a sister in between. That's where it all started. Big change in my life for sure. Still young enough that you didn't have any major ties to friends and such. It's mostly family connections that linger on, and you kind of built a new life in Canada, and it's been great. So I grew up in rural Ontario, Canada, about 2.5 hours outside of Toronto, right up against Lake Huron, a town of 1,300 people. Very coincidental, and that's because of that farming tie. It's a very, 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 very unique childhood from that perspective, anyways. Not a lot going on. It was kind of the before social media existed, everyone in town, knew what was going on before the next day if something had happened, right? Just by word of mouth. So that's the environment that I grew up in. Yeah. And then I finished high school. I went to Georgian College in Barrie, just north of Toronto, did a 2-year business diploma right out of high school. And I was pretty eager to be done school at the time. I was really excited just to get into the field, to do things. I was okay at school, not absolutely exemplary, that's for sure. So I ended up doing a 1-year internship with an agriculture cooperative throughout Europe, and did that for a year in 2015 into 16. And yeah, finished that off with some Spanish lessons down the south of Spain for a month. And then I came back and I partnered with my dad in what is today Protekta, which is what we run today, a team of 10 people across Canada and the US. It was just him on his own when I finished the internship. And yeah, we got together. We had a really great product that had a lot of potential behind it. And we doubled our efforts and grew it to where it is today. So yeah, that's and I guess to finalize, I sit in the US. I've relocated to California this year, and I head up our US operations together with our team, helping pull together future team members down here. And I'm also a fairly new role that I've taken on within more of a global role within one of our primary suppliers, where I assist them internationally. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a good background.
I am sure it gives to our audience. I did know a little bit about this life experience, so it's great that everyone knows. Everyone now also knows about this experience. So being born in Denmark, then going to Canada, now living in US, pretty extended experience for a guy with what, 28, 27? How old are you right now?
Yeah. If you're doing the math on when I was 8 in 2003, 27. So
27. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Pretty experienced though. No, that's great. Lasse, and the next question I have here, would love to hear more from your side on what were, like, if you had to choose 3 top experiences you had until now, which I'm pretty sure you had many with all this experience, but the top 3 experiences you had and in your life, and what did you learn with those experiences?
Sure. Yeah, and I won't promise they're the top ones. They're just the ones that come to mind, I guess.
You can remember the ones you can remember.
Important experiences. Yeah, I think to step back a little bit there, where I didn't go into too much detail on how I ended up in that internship through the agriculture cooperative, which is actually called DLG. It's a Danish farmer cooperative. It's the largest cooperative in Denmark, or farmer-owned cooperative in Denmark, or one of them anyways. I'd say top 3. It might compete with Arla, which also makes some cheese and such, as some of you guys might know. Anyways, how I got associated with that was my father was representing some of the products prior to their involvement, but they ended up purchasing a couple of the product lines that he was representing right around the time when I was still going to college. And I attended a Eurotier in Germany, which takes place every 2 years. Is actually coming up here in 2 weeks again in Hanover, Germany. And this was back in 2014. Yeah. So I would have been about starting my second year of college. And I went to that with him, and I ended up, being at the exhibition with this company, and the CEO of DLG was there. And we ended up at the restaurant afterwards, having dinner, having a couple of beers. And at this point in time, I didn't really, I was going to business school. I just liked everything business, everything about it. And I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. But that trip kind of solidified some things for me. After a conversation with him, he said, well, why don't we put something together where you come over here and work for some time, and we put you through some different divisions. And when I sit and kind of reflect on that, that was a pretty life-changing moment, because it just drove me into the agriculture industry. And there's no doubt that that's the reason I'm sitting here today and been a big part of having done what we've done. So what I learned from that, I guess, you don't have to have everything figured out all the time. you know, things will come at you and you have to play them as they do. And then over just more general stuff, I think because of the moves that I've made, like with Canada, and now even just this past almost year now of being in the US, I mean, meeting new people, making good, deep relationships. I mean, those are those are always like the most profound full experiences for me, because I just love building together. I like being around people who you care about, who care about you, who you can trust. And I don't know, even I'd say the past couple of years, I've realized the importance of that and really enjoyed those things. So that's more of a broad experience. And let's see, this past trip to the Middle East was at least eye opening for me. Just being in that culture, that environment, understanding it from a different perspective. Um, yeah, and I've traveled a fair bit, and I've known how important it has been for my own like self development and again perspective, and it just solidified that again. Just a good reminder of you really don't know anything until you're there on the ground talking with other humans and learning exactly from their point of view, not through any sort of other filter or anything like that. And yeah, so I'd say those are definitely three kind of pretty prominent experiences in the past little while that I can reflect on. So
Beautiful. Yeah, and just I loved like how you brought your first experience and bringing back what you said in your first question about like, hey, we're okay, like during school, never like how can I say that? Uh, Never
how
had like the best student ever, and
no.
I can relate with that a lot. Sometimes for me, like school and just the format of how things are done, you don't
Mhm.
sometimes you just don't fit exactly on in this model of education. And again, I can totally relate with that. After I finished my high school, I didn't have anything figured out also, right? What would I do? And here for me, something similar happened, not in Euro tier like for you, where you were there and then suddenly a beer here, a beer there, a few people that you met, and then that changes your life forever. I had a similar experience, but like I had just finished my high school, was like, what will I do from my life with my life? I was like thinking about doing business school and stuff. And because I was drinking with a friend that I didn't see for a while, I haven't seen him for a while. And then I started talking to him like, hey, what you're doing? He was doing some random course about graphic arts. And I was like, okay, what do you do? Like, what do you learn? And he said, oh, Photoshop and stuff. And I went, whoa, I like Photoshop. I used to play with that when I was like younger. And because of that, this conversation, my whole life changed. And it's like a chain of things that went happening that just happened because like there in the past, I was
Yeah,
there in the beach drinking with a friend, right? If I didn't have that conversation, I don't know where I would be right now. So it's nice to see how these small things might change your life forever. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how the influence, especially early when a lot of people just looking for direction, right? And you just need to follow something. I mean, I don't think that one thing that I've struggled a little bit with that has been a lot clearer to me recently is that, you know, just be good at a few key things, right? And, nothing is permanent. I mean, you don't have to, because you just choose to go one direction and dedicate a lot of time to learning and a degree, that makes you very valuable in that area. But if you one day decide that that's not for you or you want to do something else, you can change it. And those skills that you've learned there will invariably be very valuable wherever you go. So, I mean, and that's at least what I realized. So I'm sure it's a similar thing for you. We're always learning.
yeah,
So
yeah, and learning how to apply your knowledge, your skills to other things that are not directly related to what you do. So being good
exactly.
and trying to adapt. Yeah, I cannot say that in English perfectly, but like the ones that survive are not the ones that are
Yeah,
the strongest, but the ones that adapt, right? So
exactly.
I can totally relate to that. And another thing is like when you leave high school, I would say it will change from country to country, like how the education is done in each country. But how I feel right now and how I felt when I left high school in 2009, I was like, I had no, you have no idea. So like, if you see it as a final decision for your life to, you need to make a final decision what you're going to work and do to the rest of your life with like 17 years old, like when
Yeah,
you're
right.
17 years, what? Like
No
there's
wonder
no
it's
sense in
incredibly
that.
intimidating. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So this is something I always try to keep with me. Like be able to learn new things and change. I was focused on education before I started working in Wisenetix, formerly Swine, now
yeah.
Wisenetix. So I just saw it as an opportunity and I was like, hey, let's go for it, why not? So if I could give
Right.
a message right now for people that are listening to us, like be brave, take some challenges. Life is dynamic, things are not definitive. So cool.
Absolutely.
Lasse, usually we start with a brief introduction here, like we just did, and then we do a transition to a moment where we're going to be talking about marketing and business, right? So the question we have to do this transition is a question that I think it's easy for you to answer. Is that how would your parents describe what you do? You work with your your father, so I
Yeah,
don't. If he can't explain what you do, then I think you there's a problem there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess it's just to clarify. Yeah, it's a little unique situation because we're quite, you know, relatively still what you would consider a family company, and even though my mother wasn't involved until, I mean, she's always been involved in the business. She's been a very, very important part in the background financially, alongside my father, right, helping along. But she did have her own businesses as well too, that she ran independently of what we do today. And then a few years back, she exited those and joined our company full time, which has been a major help, an accelerant in our growth. So now there's quite a few of us, yeah, and more recently, my sister has joined as well too. So there's a lot of family in there. So how would they say what I do, or explain what I do? Um, let's play around with that a little bit. I think I know my no, both of them, yeah, very similar because they think quite alike. They're probably always they're having to be the ones who hold me back. I like to push the bar probably a little bit too much, too many times, and I actually think that's been a great balance between us, especially between my dad and I. He definitely has that same gene in him. That's where I have it from. But him being older now and having gone through a bunch of his own uh, experiences, right? He kind of sees when I'm maybe got my eyes on something, and he keeps everything grounded. So that's been pretty healthy. Yeah, they look at me as the everything technological, everything systems oriented. Sometimes a little bit too systems oriented, which I know it can be a lot when you're dealing with. I know just how complicated technology can be for myself, let alone someone who didn't grow up with a phone in their hands. I'm always kind of the one trying to implement systems and operations within our company, and I get a little bit of a little bit a little bit of heat from that sometimes until it plays out well, and we look back and then we kind of agree that okay, this worked, this didn't, and yeah, we're all at the end of the day hopefully a little bit better off. So yeah, that's I guess they obviously know what I do day to day, but that maybe gives you a little bit more view of how they look at me, at least as a role within the company. So
The guy who bring the new ideas and process and technology to the company. Yeah, you need to keep the pace with the industry. So
for sure, yes.
that's cool. That's cool. Lasse, so now jumping to a little bit more about marketing and business, what are the biggest challenges in terms of marketing and communications that Protecta and yeah, your company Protecta faces today?
Yeah, today, um, yeah, I'd say quite a bit different than when I joined. Obviously, coming from very little, just having a logo, no brand strategy or anything, and having learned a lot along the way how important that is. Yeah, I'd say today it's still just your small team. you're trying to compete with larger companies who have their own in-house marketing that are just used to, oh, we send that to marketing and we get that done, right? Whereas when you try to facilitate that as a 10-person team where there is no one person dedicated to marketing, those we kind of rely on freelancers, right? Which we've got a much better grasp of today, and back to the brand strategy again, and creating a really good set of guidelines that obviously helps a lot, and understanding the importance of setting that direction that no one's really going to tell you what to do, of course, especially within the advertising world, unless you get some good people. So I'd say that's always been the struggle, is trying to gain as much control of your brand, and making sure you can actually execute on those, whether it's putting content out or running an ad strategy, or consistency through all, documents and templates and stuff. So, one customer isn't using their own completely off the rails PowerPoint, or one colleague isn't using off the rails PowerPoint and another one's using a different one. And it's always a work in progress. I'm sure that's exactly what someone in the head of a marketing department would feel the heat of. Yet that still kind of falls on my ears. So
keep consistency. So
yeah.
I can relate with that. Even one guy once told me that, like, marketing is first you need people. You need labor, right? You need to these things are not fast things to be done. Create content, like good content, put everything there, in the visual identity, and make your whole language and branding strategy to be perceived as something consistent by your clients or by the audience. So that is hard. And even like when you have to use help from outside, most of times, like, you have your idea of how your brand should look like, how should people see that, and that's most of times, I'd say, it's not exactly aligned with how the people that are going to be working with you are doing. So it's a complete misconception, because you have something in your head, and sometimes it's hard to translate that for the people that are going to be executing things. And so this guy once told me that marketing, and although I really understand, I don't think this is something absolute, like for 100%, but marketing is something too important strategically for you to just handle to someone outside of your own company. Like, you are inside, you know what's happening, you know what's the best strategy. So taking this from your head and putting into someone's head so they can execute properly, it's always a challenge, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I struggled a lot with that. And it's only been the last, it was under COVID. I had a lot of quiet time, and I just realized exactly that. We'd worked with some different larger agencies and stuff. And at one point, because I was just like, I'm done with this. I don't want to, I just want someone to do this on autopilot for me, pay them. We had, enough cash flow at that point, that we just decided, okay, we're at the size where I just want to allocate this. I just want to be able to email someone, boom, you guys strategize, we get brainstorming sessions, boom, you guys execute, right? And it was just way too premature. We weren't clear on what we even wanted. And that, went through 2 iterations of that. And then finally realized, I'm like, I just need to sit down and just figure this out, pull together everything that I already know, everything that how we think about this brand. And I spent 2 or 3 days just with headphones on up in my office during COVID, listening to some audio machine music, very in the zone, and just writing out like a brand strategy guide, like a full document for it. And then I worked with the designer and got everything built and right. And ever since then, it's like, nothing is still perfect, but my goodness, has that ever made life easier. So yeah, that just, and then we just work with freelancers, right? Whenever you need something done, yes, to your point, you can't just, that was the closest you can get to, you need to put everything down on paper, and so you can hand it to someone. And then, if they don't come with what is portrayed in that paper, you can just tell them to read it again, or ask them if they read it, or say, oh, what don't you understand about it, right? But at least there's a clear direction on what we should be going for, and that helps a lot. And I'm sure that's applicable in so many different areas too.
Yeah.
So.
sometimes I feel like people that have a little bit less experience in I don't know, in marketing and things like, when you say something about a brand guide, some people see a brand guide more like a visual identity
Right.
guideline, how to
Yeah.
apply your logo, so you have, I don't know, so it can, have the right colors and stuff. But the whole concept is there. Like, there is a whole concept you want to bring to the industry and make people how do you want to make people feel about your brand. And it's
Mhm.
not only about the visual applying your
No.
logo. No, that's a brand is a institution. It's almost like every time more we see brands like person, right? Brands today, they have tone of voice, like they communicate through social media, through any channels. So it's never for me, it's never too much. Like, if you can create the proper guidelines and make something that has consistency and has a sense, has a
Like
meaning,
an identity, right? I think
an
is
identity.
commonly
Yeah,
called a brand identity as well too, which absolutely, yeah, couldn't
exactly.
agree anymore. Yeah,
Cool. And so you have all this thing about the brand identity, and there's one thing that, in our opinion, so we are focused on content, so we always bring the conversation to that.
for sure.
But you have the whole concept of your brand, but for you to success in an industry where a technical approach is really important, about people trusting, knowing that you are an expert. Do you think that producing and sharing technical content, how important is producing and sharing content for a brand positioning today, in your opinion? And why do you think that?
Yeah, I think yeah, to pull on your question there and maybe point out where it is important is that if you're within, I think in most cases it is, sure, but there are also, the technical portion of that is the very important one, right? Like if you're in an industry where there's a lot of research around it, right? You've got a lot of other strong players there who've been entrenched for a long time, big R&D budgets, lots of very smart people running those. It sets a very, very high bar for a small company to come in and a group of people to come in and just all of a sudden say, hey, look at us, buy our products, right? Like against the company and the sales rep who's been on that farm, or technical representative who's been on that farm or in that business that's supplying the farm for the past 40, 50 years, right? I mean, that's yeah, I think it becomes incredibly important, and it's something that um, we haven't done with a lot of intent, I would say, yet. What the content we have produced has been just to service and back up and support our products, right? So and by that, we've over the past 3-4 years accumulated a lot of material that when you start to look back at, you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of stuff of value here. There's a lot of stuff that's generic to the point where it's not just specific to our product, but actually adds a lot of new knowledge and value to the industry. And as we grow, like I said, it it's it's definitely something that I'm always looking to do more of. We have the brand strategy in place right now. It's been working well, right? Now it's taking some of these content pieces and utilizing them digitally and putting them out to more people, right? And showing that, being very open about the stuff that we're doing, just to show that, hey, like we might be the new kid on the block, but that doesn't mean that we can't be really shaking up the industry. So that's where I think it comes, right? I mean, if you actually do have stuff of merit, then yeah, it's incredibly important to get that down and get it out so that people can read it and they can associate that with your brand, and that's what builds your reputation over time. So
100%. And yeah, like, and now, just so people don't think I'm trying to sell anything to them,
yeah,
it's funny because we see it. It's for us. It's really important for companies to have their positioning, their digital positioning, right? Position themselves in social media, in internet in general, through podcasts, through events, like, because you get the opportunity of reaching people in a different way that you would like in traditional marketing. But that's in an industry that also has a lot of where it's an industry where it's really important also to have a in-person presence, right? There are not many producers. You have like about 50 producers responsible for 70% of the whole production in the US, for example. And it's for me, I see it as a very important thing to find a way of, of balancing your in-person activity and approach, because you need to build the relationship. You're dealing with people at the end, right? So building this relationship and showing them supporting, giving them support in terms of knowledge, in terms of product instructions or anything like that, but also bringing this knowledge and content to the digital. You need to, for me, you need to be everywhere today. It's not only about
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, I'm gonna focus on social media. No, it's not like that,
No,
right? You need to
that's a
be in all the
distribution
different
platform. Yeah,
channels.
yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah. No, it's and that's where we started, right? Just because we just like we hit the road, like hitting trade shows and conferences like crazy. Like that was our startup like plan. Really, it just worked, and we started making relationships. But I think what you can do with really good content is you can actually, you can multiply that effort a lot, right? When you then have that knowledge, and it is important that you do have it. You can't just write content for the sake of writing content. There has to be something to it. But
Perfect.
when you do have that and you put it down and then distribute it, you now allow people to, access it at their own time. You use those as reference tools, and it doesn't replace the in-person effect, but it absolutely complements it and accelerates it. So yeah.
Perfect. So, keeping in the line of the all this content marketing and um, thought leadership strategies, how do you build authority and thought leadership in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a big question. um, I
I got a
think
few good ones here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think if we, not to piggyback too much on what we just talked about, but I think again it starts with having some sort of entity, brand, identity, right? That you can build something around, that you can attach everything to. Let's keep it really simple, right? And then it becomes all these different things, and let's add some extra then on top of content. I mean, I think the first one is you need a good product or a good service, right? I mean, at least if you're looking to build authority. I'm not saying you can't sell or be very successful doing something that is not necessarily that, just with killer marketing. Absolutely, you can do that. But at least if you're trying to build authority and thought leadership, that's not that path. So yeah, good product, good service. Um, and if it's a good product, then continue in good follow-up service on that product, right? And if it's a service product, then a continued, meeting expectations or exceeding them, right? And just that really good person to client, or like business to client relationship, right? And then time. Like I think, and I'm very guilty of this myself, and this is again where my dad comes into the play of, just someone who's older and maybe not running around as much. He's way as active as I am, but in his head anyways, he's more patient than I am. um, Even though he might not, that's at least how he portrays himself. Maybe internally he's just quelling it appropriately, and he's learned from his past experiences. But yeah, like you just, consistency and time, like get those things in place and then just do the work. Like be good, do good service to your customers, focus on product improvement, always be, focusing on improving the customer experience, and then just keep doing it. Like, because time is going to then, when you're in that 1 to 3 4 year stage, you're still a new company. But then as soon as you start getting past that 4 or 5 10 year, all of a sudden now that reputation just precedes you, right? And that helps. But it's not the only thing that builds authority. But if you've been doing those things over that period of time, now you really start to build it. And I don't think you can do a lot of things, and if you ace all these things from the get-go, sure, can you speed up that process? Or if you have a heck of a lot of investor money and you hire, key researchers or industry professionals from other private companies or research institutions, sure. I mean, that's another way to go about it as well too, and you should consider that. But I mean, you can't skip over the fact that it just takes time as well too. So
Perfect. Time is an important thing here for sure. Like people sometimes expect like, hey, I'm gonna start produce. I see that producing technical content, sharing this with my audience, this is important. So they start doing things and they have consistency for a few months, and then okay, it's been like 6 months I'm doing things, but my sales haven't increased a lot
Right.
yet. So wait, come down. Like this is a sales are of course every company, like every company wants to have their profit. They want to be sustainable, financially sustainable. But these things, they don't happen from day to night or night to day. So you gotta be consistent. You gotta keep doing the boring work, and with time you're gonna get there. Pretty sure about it. Um, Lasse, so now thinking about your career, what do you think is the most important lesson you have learned so far?
Yeah. Uh, let's see. Well, it's still pretty early. Seeing as
Yeah,
I'm
so
just getting
far
started.
there's room for you to learn much more. I'm pretty sure
Absolutely. Yeah. No. So
for
it's
all of us.
as I say this, I caveat that obviously I know that I still consider myself in such an infancy in my life that it's like, the urgency is real of like when I hit 30, I'm rushing every day. I'm patient long term and incredibly impatient short term, but I also understand that it's early in the grand scheme of things. So, um, I don't know. I think it's maybe a little bit cheesy and it's age old, but just like trust and reputation, because I think it all comes back to that. And it's not like it's something that it's not it's just the core thing that has really been solidified for me, and to not ever sacrifice that to do it. Just, you can break it, and everyone talks about this, right? But you can break it down in like a matter of no time, and it takes years to build, right? So I just think it's the strongest symbol of like a person's character. If you're in conversation with their close acquaintances and there's never a hiccup regarding trust, because you just know how hard that is to build and how valuable it is. It's certainly something that I've seen, and you can write contracts, you can write agreements. It never works if you don't have the trust. That's what it's all grounded in, because yeah, uh, and then trust, and that is directly followed by reputation. I mean, your trust is your reputation, is a big part of it. So I don't know what else to say to that. I'm very, very principled, and and when it comes to reputation, though, I guess I focus on my own principles. I listen to feedback from the people who know me well. I listen to external feedback, and I don't get caught up in let's say accused reputation from people who don't know me well. And I guess that's something that you have to be quite self-aware on what are they talking about. Are you getting sensitive because they are calling something out that you are sensitive on? Or is it really just because, hey, no, they're looking at it from this point of view, right? I mean, if you sat down and had a conversation with them, sure, you'd learn something from it too, but would you maybe give them tidbits of information that would give them a different perspective, right? So um, yeah, I think that's where I'd leave that.
Yeah, trust and credibility. So sometimes you're dealing, for example, you guys Protekta, you deal a lot with a B2B business, probably through, right? So sometimes I think, and again, I bring it to the same point, being repetitive here, but although you're dealing with a company, there is a person behind the chair, right behind the desk, and it's you're gonna deal with a person, not exactly with a company. So
Always, yeah, yeah,
if if you don't have credibility, if you cannot be trusted, there's no business. So it's
for
a
sure, yeah.
good point. Um, and so you have learned about trust and credibility. You might have learned this by yourself, but who was the main mentor for you so far? Like, who, besides the things you learned by yourself, like who's the guy or the girl or the woman or the man, or who is
Yeah, yeah.
the person who helped you to learn the most? Who was the best mentor you had so far?
You know, I was always hopeful that there was going to be this one person who was going to walk into my life who I could just like, or I could seek out and just get them to be my mentor. I think that was already at like 17, 18 years old. I'm like, I know how important like a mentor is, right? Like I need to find this person who's gonna help give me direction and flesh out my thoughts and everything. And it never really happened. Not one person. I think I'll give credit to Tim Ferriss for writing a book called Tribe of Mentors. But when I look at where I've gotten the most things from, sure, there's key people in different areas, but it is really like a tribe of people. Like there's not, and it all depends on the field. It depends on whether it's something that's just personal, something that's specifically within the business field, right? Those could be two completely different people that you go to. Like I'd say I probably have 8 to 10 really good, what I would consider mentors. And that ranges from friends, business acquaintances, family, from old, to like in their 80s to well in between there, and to some who are younger than me. Right. And they all, I guess I have a good enough understanding of their background and where they come from. And I put that up against the type of advice that they give me. And that's, I think it can be a little bit dangerous to put all focus on to one mentor. Maybe I'm naive in that. Maybe I'm just silly and I haven't found the right one. but if anyone wants to step up and be my mentor, and I'm there. If you want to be the one,
leave a message.
Who gives all the answers, please.
Yeah, no, I think you got a point here. Like we can learn from most of people, I'd say, even from the bad people, because there's even you can also learn what not to do, right? So no, that's a good point. I feel like I was in the same place. Like in the past, I was like, hey, someday I need to have either a boss or business partner, someone that will bring light to the darkness of my naiveness, if this is a word. And I don't know. I speak Portuguese, but I mean,
it's okay. We get the context.
You got the idea. So, and like the bad thing about, I think the bad thing about thinking this way, if you're waiting for one specific person to come and change your life, is that you're going to get basically the perspective of one person, right? And the world is too plural and diverse for you to have one point of view. So it's good to know that like there are many people out there that you can learn with.
And I will say though, to actually put someone out there from like a public, let's take a public mentor. One that's been really important is I say Ray Dalio. He's the founder of Bridgewater Associates, which is I believe it is the largest hedge fund in the world. And I mean, that guy, his level of analytical thinking and his humbleness is surreal. And I guess when I started reading his stuff, like his like reports on the world economy, and he came up with principles back in 2017, 2018, reading that book, I was like, it was like I really connected with his way of thinking, and it just solidified all these kind of somewhat blurry thoughts that were going on in my head. And that, like that, it gave me a lot of direction anyways, or just confidence in how I thought and how I was as a person. I'm like, wow, I mean, this guy's done so well. And I've had a hard time like making sense of my mind. And then I was reading his things and I'm like, oh my goodness, like this way he goes and how principled he is. This is like how I naturally am. And now this is someone else who does that. And this guy took it even to the more extreme. He like now showed me how to write them down and like to really like analyze them and live by them and how to reflect on them and everything. And I thought that was a beautiful thing. So that definitely, from a public figure point of view, he's played a pretty important part. So.
Yeah, in a few minutes, I'm going to be asking you about some books for you to recommend. If you could recommend any book from him now, I'm curious to know more.
Sure, sure.
Uh, Lasse, and you were in the beginning of our conversation, you were telling us about like how you are the guy that brings the new ideas and technologies, and sometimes your parents need to keep your feet in the ground on the ground.
Yeah.
So if you deal with lots, try to bring new processes and technologies, you probably care about productivity. And my question here is like, do you have any productivity hack that you think it's essential or great that you'd like to share with the audience?
Um, yeah. So it's a great question. I used to be completely like entrenched in that, thinking optimize, 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 right? And it's a very vicious cycle, I will say. And nowadays, I have it honed down to some really simple things. I sleep 8 hours whenever I can, which is pretty much all the time, with some exceptions of early meetings because of other parts of the world and such. And if I can, I'll just get to bed earlier and make sure I still get those 8 hours of sleep. That's so key. My concentration goes down like on a very steep graph. If I don't, 7.5 is fine. Anywhere between 7 and 8 is good. If it's a little bit more intense day, 8. If it's been a lighter fully and I've, haven't been doing as much physical exercise, 7.5 hours is fine. But so that's key. Then meditation. Meditation is very, very fundamental. And I know that's been incredibly like popular for the last 4 or 5 years as well too. I've just continued to hone that over the past 6-7 years and have it to a point where I just understand that there's always so much work to be done, but I can look back on it and just see how that it brings a lot of clarity, it brings a lot of focus, intent, especially in such a distraction filled world of instant gratification. Being able to just sit with yourself and do nothing and pay attention to what your mind is doing and then to react, right? The awareness, my goodness, that will get you out of jumping between different tasks and seeing a notification on your phone and having to go to it right away, right? Like that power of the mind is incredible. And I think the best way to hone it is meditation and then exercise. Very like religiously have an exercise routine. It's not, I used to be, I'm get up early. So I get up at like 4:45 pretty much every morning. And I used to work out like always pretty much right away. That has changed now. I just work out at whatever time during the day that works for me within the schedule, right? Sometimes if I have like a 5 a.m. call, like I did this morning actually, and I haven't worked out today, I'll work out, sometime later this afternoon as it kind of fits into my schedule and calendar, right? But just keeping that consistently, always 90 minutes of movement and taking a call, walking outside with headphones in instead, right? And keeping blood flowing. Yeah. And okay, but maybe a little bit more actually actionable things. Those are just general good things. I think if you focus on those things, it makes what I'm about to say a lot easier. And then I think you need external systems that allow you to just always dump everything out of your mind, because especially my mind, and you can let me know what you think, but thoughts, they come, they go, and then they're gone until maybe they reappear again at some point in time. That could be later today, that could be next week, that could be a month from now, right? But I mean, you can't work with that. So I have a lot of different lists, all that are for different things, for private life, for work, for different things within work, for when I'm in communication with someone, things I need to remember to bring up with them, right? So whenever that thought comes to mind, I immediately dump it out into that list, and it's like on my phone, it's on my computer, so that I just can forget about it right away. And then I just always check back to that list or those lists. And that's incredibly helpful for me, just to make sure that as little as possible falls through the cracks. I won't say that it never does, because that's definitely a lie. So
I need to start creating those lists. Marcio, for people that don't know, Marcio is the founder of Wisenetix. I've been working with him closely, and he always brings like the importance of having those lists. This, maybe in the future, maybe we'll not do anything with that, but at some point, you might miss, I don't know, $1 million idea.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's good.
exactly.
It's good to have a place to save them. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I need to. It's been a year now that I'm telling myself to do it. I'll take this as the initiative, the
There's
spark to start this routine.
Yeah, it's hard because it can be like overwhelming. Like, where do you start, right? And then you start just doing a random list, but then it's like, how do you organize your list? And that was my mind tends to just like get caught in the analysis or paralysis by analysis circle, and I have to constantly break myself out of that, and I'm getting better, but it's always a work in progress. But this wasn't this. I don't think this would be a book recommendation, but for this specific part, the art, this I think I have it right here. Getting things done by David Allen. Yeah,
Yeah.
that helped me a lot. I didn't implement all of his things, but I just needed something where I was like, just tell me what to do in this area, like how to organize some of these things, right? And when I read through that, it gave me enough where I'm like, it's been incredibly helpful, yeah, to put some systems in place. There's another book I really want to read on that called Building a Second Brain. That's probably my second one within the whole organization, and making sure that I have it as good as it could be, and then we get back to just doing the work.
Uh,
Yeah.
I was looking to my shelf here because I bought Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be somewhere here. And yeah, it's a good book, but still, it's important to put things in practice.
For sure.
And just staying a little bit more here, you were
Mhm.
mentioning about meditation, and yes, this has become like more famous. Lots of people practicing each time more. I remember when I was a competitor by 2013, 2012, I used to do a little bit of meditation. Okay, I've tried for a while. I'm not the most disciplined person, so and because I finished this competition, after the competition, I didn't continue with my meditation. Do you have any tips like for people that want to start with meditation, like how do you think they should start, for how long, how many days a week, what is meditation?
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert by all means, but I can just tell you what I've done, and recently what has really worked for me and solidified some good practices. So I think I started just meditating with like the Headspace app back in 2000, like not long after it came out. I know I was still in Concard, and it was right after I came back from Europe. So maybe like 2016. I just started doing guided meditations, and I would do 10, 15 minutes in the morning after breakfast. And that little step when you're coming from nothing did so much for me. And I was sorry to just, most people, hopefully at this point, have heard a little bit about meditation, but in its simplest form, there are quite a few different strategies. But the main thing, to boil it down, is just sitting with yourself, focusing on something. And there's different types of techniques, right? Whether you're doing body scans, you're focusing on your breath. There's some that include mantras, right? Where you repeat something out loud and the vibration kind of puts you into a meditative state. But the whole point is that your mind's going to wander. And that's like what you talk about, that you're not the most disciplined. I would say I'm not either, right? That's why I practice it, because it trains your body to be better at that. Like the whole point is your mind is going to wander. And then it's just the more you do it, the quicker you realize, and the quicker you bring it back to whatever you're supposed to be focusing on. And you're just training a muscle. Like your brain is a muscle, and you're training it to continue doing that. So it's like, it is the ultimate productivity hack. That some of the greatest meditators that I've met, it's almost scary to be in their presence of like how aware they are what's going on, and just like they don't you could be they will not lose a train of thought without, like, they could be way far gone from it and just come right back to it. Like they know exactly, they can organize their mind in such a freaky way that it's very, very like humbling and inspiring at the same time. So I would start with that. If you really, so I was doing that for quite a while, and then this summer I like dove headfirst in, because I'm like, I need to really understand a deep technique and do something at a deeper level. And I did I did, because I'm in California now, right? So now you're in the very much more spiritual area, and I did a Vipassana 10-day Vipassana meditation up in the high desert in August, or the end of July into August, which is you can look it up. It's like a and this is not a recommendation or anything. I'm just telling you what I did, right? It's a not-for-profit, non-religious, non-sectarian type of religion that spread throughout India, originally from Burma. It was kind of carried on through some villages, and this Goenka teacher picked it up back in the 70s and essentially started spreading it. And it grew throughout Europe, and now there's like 13 meditation centers in the US and all around the world as well too. And you essentially go into it's silent. So you take a vow of silence the day before. It's 10 full days of the exact same schedule. You're meditating 10 hours a day. You get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and you essentially start meditating 4:30 a.m. And then there's like little breaks and breakfast and lunch and stuff in between. But you have like fully allocated 10 hours of meditation a day with very little guidance, but just enough that you don't go absolutely crazy. And 10 days of doing that, and you come out, and now you really start to get a much better understanding of how deep you can go with meditation and how profoundly it can in fact like impact your mind. And after leaving that, I now meditate half an hour every morning, even though they recommend you do an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. Maybe one day I'll get to that. I think that's a lot. Their argument is that you'll need to sleep less and you'll be more productive in the time you're not meditating anyways. So stop thinking about the 2 hours that you spend meditating and just focus on the ones that you're not, which maybe I haven't gone deep enough in the practice that I understand that yet. But for now, I pretty religiously meditate half an hour every morning. And I would say that's the next step. You have to be pretty intentional if you're going into Vipassana meditation, because it is kind of like self-imposed solitary confinement. So if your interest is there for meditation and you've played around with it and you feel like you just need that next nudge, and you can it doesn't cost anything. It's a not-for-profit. You can choose to donate afterwards when you've gone if you'd like. So yeah, that was maybe a long-winded answer, but that was pretty recent in the experiences. So
yeah, I think I might try it again. I've been thinking about starting again. I did it, and basically the methodology I would use is focusing on my breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like you said, like you start inspiring, and what's the word for letting it out?
Respiration. Focus on respiration.
And respiration in general. And then you are there, and then suddenly you're not there anymore, and your head is like thinking about this random thing, and you were like, hey, come back to your respiration. But it's good. And I think it's every time it's more important because we're so deep into like technology and like information. Your head, like it's this year, sorry to jump from one subject to the other, but just to make the relation about how important I believe it is. Like this year I lost my grandfather. He was like 93 years old, and it was so funny because he was still pretty lucid by the end of his life, and he could remember like stories from his life that happened, and he could tell you the stories like, hey, it was, I don't know, 5th of May of 79, and I was doing this and that, and I'm like, I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday.
I
like
know.
He remembers the whole thing, and the thing is like, of course he has a good memory, but also he was living in a period that there were not many things happening, or if they were, well, they were happening probably, but less than right now. And it just like things didn't get to him. There was no information. Information came through, I don't know, a journal, something like the newspaper. Once in a while, they didn't have TV. And right now we are surrounded by so much information that our brain goes, woo, crazy. It's good to keep focused. It's nice.
It's there's so many. It's so easy to get caught nowadays with all the distractions and all the different like information flow, to just get caught in a state of like where you're not aware what's going on, right? Like you're just moving on autopilot and you're not really, I never thought I would catch myself saying present, because I always associated that with being, some woo woo spiritual thing, but it really is that simple. Like you're not actually there with what's going on in the moment. You're always thinking about something that happened in the past or in the future, or trying to get some new sort of sensory, input, or to get a hit of dopamine, right? There's been a lot of talk about that, and it's so relevant. Like if you can just be comfortable and be present with what you're doing in the moment, and then I think that was just much easier to do when there wasn't as many inputs, right? So I have a couple grandparents too where it's the exact same thing. Like it's freakish what my grandma, like she will remember everyone's birthday, and she can remember like days stuff happened, and she does just have a good memory too, for sure. There is something else going on there too, and someone who studies neurology can probably explain that hopefully a little bit better. But there's no doubt that there was just less distractions too. So yeah.
Cool. So we are wrapping up here. Lasse, my idea now it's get your final thoughts and a few recommendations, and I would like to start with a few books, 3 books you would recommend for our audience.
Okay. This isn't a meditation book, but Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'm a big Stoic follower, and just Stoic philosophy and the that train of thought in general. And I just think what makes that book so powerful is he didn't write it for anyone. They're just his daily meditations to himself, right? An ancient Roman leader who's writing all these thoughts down to himself, and kind of a little bit like Ray Dalio, like they're his principles that he's reflecting on, right? Or things that he needs to be aware of to himself. And just reading those is like, it's very humbling. It's wild how relevant they are, like so many hundreds of years later, and you're reading it. And I just read one again this morning because I kind of like, there's also like this, there's a book called The Daily Stoic where Ryan Holiday puts them all together. I don't even know. Holiday. Where he pulls from different ancient philosophers, right? And the one this morning was like talking about when the doctor prescribes ice baths. And I like read that again. I'm like, wait, is this actually the quote from, did he say prescribes ice baths? I'm like, what is this? Were they doing that back then? So anyways, they're just whenever in doubt, just go back to the classics and you'll find a lot of the same information just regurgitated in new books anyway. So that one is great. Then I think sticking with a little bit of classics just because of relevant geopolitical tensions. I think if you haven't read The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, I think that's very, very relevant from just what's happening in the world and how the next 10 to 20 years will play out. Just to have that, understand again that that book was written 500 years ago. And it just gives you a lot of context and saying we've been here before. And it doesn't mean that we have the answers this time, but we sure as heck know what's worked in the past and what hasn't. And these observations are not new. So that one. And what else? Let's see. Then sure. Let's say Ray Dalio's book, Principles, because you asked about that.
Thanks.
It came out in 2017, and it's essentially it's his work and life principles. So he like divvied them up in 2 parts of the book, and he's taken note of all the things when he's gotten into a decision where he's had a tough decision to make, or reflected on something where he made a decision. He's like, what guided that decision, and do I agree with it, right? And then he would hone that into a principle and list them all, and he did that through his life and his work. And it's reading through that, there's probably a lot of them that you could relate to, or you would aspire to want to take on yourself, and it might inspire you to build your own based on that, just seeing how someone else has done it. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for the tips. My next question here is, we were talking about what you have learned and experiences. So when it comes to failure, what was your biggest failure so far, and what did you learn from this experience?
Yeah. I think is it, let's see if there, maybe I would hope I could think of one very large specific one. I would say in general, maybe this is being a little dodgy. I'm not trying to be, but I think what I've done a lot of times is I've maybe listened blindly to different people or like what I would consider to be authoritative figures, and just taken their advice without triangulating that, without putting it into context. This comes a little bit back to what type of mentors you choose and such, right? Where you either read something or you hear someone standing in a public situation, they say something, and because they're there in that situation, you just like, oh, well, it must be true. And I think this is relevant for the younger you are, right? You obviously start to get this concept of not how the world works. And but early on, I maybe wish I would have gotten into tune with that a little bit earlier and not just believed in as many things as I did blindly, without doing my own kind of due diligence. And if it was someone who I just liked their charismatic, you know, way of being or who they were or how they looked, I'm like, oh no, it's true, right? And then I'm a contrarian at heart, so if someone would challenge what I was thinking, I say, I don't know, like then I would double down on my point of view, right? And I've really, uh, I just wish I would have come to the state of mind that I'm in right now, where, again, it's never perfect, but I really work to catch myself if I'm being defensive or, challenging a view that doesn't have a lot of ground in my own, that I've done my own research on as much as I should, right? I'm much more comfortable being very open about that now and saying, no, you know what, here's what I think right now, but that may not be how it is. Tell me what you think, right? And I used to think that was a weakness and like double down on my point of view. I'm sure I'm still stubborn and do that in some areas, but I really that has hurt me and caused some pretty heated situations in the past. So
Yeah. I got it. For me, flexibility, being able to adapt, and being open-minded enough to say, "Hey, this is my idea right now. It might not be my idea tomorrow. Let's see." If you
exactly.
bring right, that's how you evolve and you get better. At least that's how I see. So, my last question is like you were just talking about like the Prince of Machiavelli, and how this book that was written 500 years ago can still be relevant. So how do you see, so trying to understand the world now, how do you think the world will look like in about 20 years?
Yeah, it almost, my mind like starts sparking everywhere when I try to think 20 years down the road. It's so hard for me. It just
Too many predictions together.
yeah, it's we throw some predictions. I like to try to even 5-year increments now, I feel like is so almost hard to do. But let's maybe grab a few points that I think that I'm at least personally a little bit uh, confident in, without being too generic, because I think it's easy to say, well, everything will be completely different than it is today, right? I so I've had quite a bit of interest in the crypto space and blockchain technology as a whole, and I think that will just continue to, more so now during a downturn in the background, just to be adopted. And people won't even, people talk about whether or not, you can talk about different coins, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatever, smart contracts, yada yada, all this type of stuff, right? But that technology, and Bitcoin as a kind of as another financial uh, uh, asset, let's say, right? Asset class, will just continue to entrench itself. It's kind of like inevitable. I really think so. So how that plays out, that means that's from the financial side, right? But smart contracts and everything, and how decisions are made and executed via which are very person dependent today. There's always going to be a human aspect to it in some areas, right? That will always shift where that is and where people are comfortable with that human aspect playing a part. I think like the, what do you call it? The Overton window shifts, right? Right now you say, oh, I would never want someone doing that or a computer controlling that, right? But then all of a sudden it just starts happening, and then it makes life easier, and then that Overton window shifts. Oh, it's already doing this, and then it does that, right? So yeah, I think that will continue to play. We're still in like the infancy of just the internet and technology as a whole. And the innovation scale is like on a crazy acceleration curve. And even though there will probably be a slump here of 3 to 4 years with the downturn that we are for sure heading into, so that's not a 20-year prediction, but the next let's say 18 to 24 months are going to be pretty unique. So in terms of just where the financial situation's at, where the global economy is at, and yeah, I don't believe we've seen the worst of that yet. So just interest rates are at a place that they haven't been in a very long time, and they've gone there very quickly, and we haven't seen the full impact of it yet. So yeah, farther out, let's maybe talk a little bit about, like I could say, on agriculture. Continued consolidation and then niche markets, a lot of regulation. That's the space that we work within, right? Like we're very closely tied to the European markets and on the ground there, and we just know what's happened in these. You can go to the Netherlands, you can go to Denmark. They're so heavily regulated compared to what we are here today in the U.S. And Canada, for that matter. Canada's a little bit more in some areas and similar in others. And that just will continue to come. Like as soon as it gets on the radar of the regulators because of consumer sentiment or something catches their eye, and whether it's right or not, whether it's been thought out fully, that doesn't matter. It's just whoever has the unfortunately it doesn't. I wish it did. I wish there was more, just good open discussion about what's right, what's wrong, right? But if we correlate to other large topics in the world, we see that's not necessarily how things play out. So so I think, but a lot of consolidation within agriculture, then some niche markets that will play, which you've already seen, like more direct consumer, specific brands playing in that space, and then the regulation portion. Yeah, will continue to just drill and change the landscape of agriculture as a whole, whether it comes to climate, whether it comes to inputs, outputs, in terms of like what are they being fed, what are we doing with their waste, yada yada, all this different stuff. That's gonna just continue to be that's a battle. That's it's, or not a battle. It's just it's a reality that there's an ever-changing landscape. So
Perfect. Yeah, it's hard to me. When you started to answer was like, yeah, 20 years is a little bit far on
yeah,
the way things are changing like so fast. It's hard to predict.
right.
And one word, are you pessimist or optimistic about the future?
So optimistic.
That's good.
Like absolutely.
That's what I needed
Yeah. No,
to put my
always.
head in a pillow.
Yeah, for sure.
uh, no, that was great, Lasse. I thank you a lot for your time. It was a great conversation. I'm pretty sure we're gonna meet again in the future once we are more professional in this in this podcast. Well, I am actually in this podcast field. I'll
This
be
is
more than
really good.
happy to have you here again.
Yeah.
And where, Lasse, where can listeners find you online?
Yeah, I on LinkedIn, it's probably the best. Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm not too active on Twitter. On LinkedIn, you can just search my name. I'll come up. There's not too many Lasse Jakobsens, at least compared to other names. So on Twitter, I can send you that as well too. I'm there as well. That's maybe another platform to connect. It's a little bit more open and direct as well too. So yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter.
Perfect. Well, Lasse's name is going to be written in the name of the episode here, so it's easier for you to find him there. And thanks a lot for you that have been listening to us in this great conversation. And I hope to see you again. And yeah, see you on next episode. Thanks.
Thank you, Ricardo.